Welcome back to PoliticallyX. I mean, imagine you're just standing at a high school track meet on a crisp Saturday morning.
Right, just a totally normal weekend.
Exactly. You've got kids in bright uniforms stretching on the grass, parents huddled in the bleachers with warm coffees, coaches are barking out lap times. It is, by all accounts, one of the most mundane, safe environments you could possibly find yourself in.
Yeah, it's a space built completely around rules and, structured competition,
Yeah.
community.
But then, in just a matter of seconds, that totally normal suburban environment shatters and becomes a fatal crime scene.
And the physical reality of what happened on that field was immediate and just devastating. But almost as quickly as the police tape went up, a second crime scene emerged, a digital one.
Right.
The actual events of that morning were just quickly swallowed up by this massive viral internet narrative. We kind of operate under the assumption that facts speak for themselves, right? That the truth will naturally bubble to the surface.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, but in the age of algorithmic social media, verified facts are frequently the very last things to be heard over the roar of digital tribalism.
Which is exactly why we're digging into this today. If you're listening to this and wondering why we're doing a deep dive on a closed case, it's because this trial is basically a masterclass in how internet reality and courtroom reality have completely split in two.
Definitely.
So today we are focusing on a case that really fractured the internet. The recent first-degree murder conviction of Karmelo Anthony for the fatal stabbing of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf.
It is just a profound, sobering tragedy. I mean, you have two young men whose lives intersected for just a few volatile moments, and it resulted in one life being permanently extinguished and another young man spending decades behind bars.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. And to understand how the public reaction derailed so violently from the actual evidence presented under oath, we're pulling from a really comprehensive breakdown provided by the YouTube channel Courtier Family.
Right. They produced this massive analysis of the trial's closing arguments, the witness testimonies, and most crucially, the intense public and activist reaction to the verdict.
And our mission today is to cut through that viral noise and examine the cold, hard facts of the courtroom. Now, the source commentators provide a very distinct, right-leaning, America First centrist perspective on this case.
Which is important to note.
Exactly. And as always, we are not here to endorse their viewpoints or, take political sides. Our goal is to impartially unpack their analysis for you. We'll be focusing heavily on three main pillars today.
Right. The strict legal threshold for self-defense, the importance of individual accountability, and their pretty strong critique of activists who attempted to frame this tragedy through a purely racial lens.
So let's just jump right into it. The courtroom reality versus the internet narrative.
Yeah, well, to understand the activist reaction later, we first have to understand the undeniable courtroom reality because, social media algorithms thrive on outrage and ambiguity. It creates a vacuum.
Oh, totally. People
Yeah.
fill in the whites.
Exactly. When people don't like the ugly truth of a situation, they manufacture a reality that fits their preferred narrative. But over the course of 4 days, the prosecution systematically dismantled that manufactured reality.
They called 21 witnesses to the stand, right?
21. We are talking about fellow students, opposing coaches, and the medical examiner.
And a medical examiner's testimony is not just clinical paperwork. The jury was actually shown graphic, harrowing autopsy photos. That grounds the entire proceeding in a very grim physical reality.
It really does. You can't argue with that kind of physical evidence. But the witness accounts are where the internet narrative, this idea of Karmelo Anthony being an innocent, ambushed victim, really falls apart.
Right, because the testimonies painted Anthony not as a victim, but as the clear, undeniable aggressor.
Yeah. I mean, the prosecution brought forward a 16-year-old witness who testified that Anthony blatantly refused to leave the Metcalf team's designated tent area.
He literally wouldn't leave their space.
Right. The sworn testimony was that Anthony stated, "F y'all, I'm not going to leave," and then issued a direct threat. He said, "Touch me and see what happens."
Wow. That is a crucial detail for the jury.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it establishes posture and intent before a single physical blow is thrown. He's placing himself in a restricted space, refusing to exit, and literally daring someone to engage him physically.
Exactly. But I know what some people might be thinking.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second. We're talking about high school athletes. Teenagers posture and talk trash constantly, It's practically a second language in competitive sports.
Sure, it happens all the time.
So how does a jury differentiate between a kid just running his mouth and a premeditated aggressor? Couldn't the defense argue that Metcalf escalated it from there?
Well, they could have tried, if not for Austin Metcalf's documented response. According to that same sworn testimony, Metcalf actively attempted to de-escalate the tension.
Really? What did he say?
He reportedly told Anthony, "I am not going to fight you." Yeah. So the jury isn't just looking at two kids engaging in mutual combat or escalating trash talk. They are looking at one party issuing violent threats and the other party explicitly stating a desire to avoid a physical altercation.
I mean, if your opponent is verbally backing down, the narrative that you were forced into a life or death struggle becomes incredibly difficult to sell.
To say the least, yeah.
But the prosecution's witnesses doing their job is one thing. The detail from the Cartier family commentary that truly underscores how futile the defense's case was is what happened during cross-examination.
Oh, the cross-examination was brutal for the defense.
I mean, how does a defense team even function when their own witnesses, the people they called to the stand, dismantle their narrative in real time?
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario for a defense attorney. And it really speaks to the overwhelming weight of the facts here. The sources highlight that Anthony's own coach testified that Anthony wasn't even supposed to be near that tent.
Wait, he wasn't even supposed to be there.
No. His designated place was down on the field warming up. He had to go completely out of his way to insert himself into that environment.
Man, and it gets worse for the defense.
Much worse. During cross-examination, one of the defense's own witnesses admitted that Anthony provoked the confrontation. The witness stated plainly on the stand, "I think Carmelo was in the wrong."
We're kidding.
On the stand.
Under oath. When the prosecution asked point blank, did Karmelo Anthony provoke the confrontation? The defense's own witness answered, yes.
The psychological impact of that on a jury cannot be overstated. When the people actively trying to defend your character are forced to admit you started the confrontation, your legal strategy is essentially entirely compromised.
It's completely gone. And this is why the source material so heavily criticizes the internet sleuths who were simultaneously inventing evidence online to defend him.
Oh, the phantom video. Cartier family pointed out this massive rumor circulating online about a secret high-definition video that supposedly showed Anthony being jumped by a mob. Yeah, people were sharing this claim everywhere, using it to justify the stabbing.
But the commentators debunked that entirely. They cited a CBS correspondent embedded at the trial. That reporter confirmed that the only existing video of the incident is just a standard, grainy CCTV surveillance feed.
Right. It doesn't show a clear, definitive ambush at all. It just shows a large gathering of students, some commotion, and then Anthony sprinting away.
So there was no secret smoking gun, just a community projecting its preferred narrative onto a tragedy.
Exactly. And because the defense's narrative was collapsing under the weight of its own witnesses, Anthony ultimately declined to take the stand.
Which the source commentators point out was really his only viable option at that point.
Oh, for sure. If you are clearly established as the instigator, getting on the stand is a monumental risk. Any hint of erratic behavior, any perceived lack of profound remorse, or any misstep during cross-examination, and the prosecution will just use your own words to secure a conviction.
Right. Taking the stand when the physical evidence and eyewitness testimony are overwhelmingly against you just opens the door for a skilled prosecutor to highlight every inconsistency in your story.
Yeah, the defense recognized this, which meant they had to abandon a narrative of pure innocence and rely entirely on a highly technical legal argument concerning the mechanics of self-defense.
And this is where the legal failure of the self-defense claim comes in. Because I always thought the colloquial understanding of self-defense was basically, if they touch me first, I have the right to finish it.
A lot of people think that, yeah.
But this case really highlights how the law puts a hard, restrictive ceiling on how you can react. The defense tried to lean heavily on the claim that Metcalf, or someone else in that crowd, pushed Anthony first.
Right.
So how does the justice system separate a physical altercation, like a shove, from a legally justified lethal response?
Well, the law operates on the principle of proportionate or reasonable force to stop an imminent threat. Self-defense is not a legal blank check for retaliation.
Okay, that makes sense.
To successfully claim self-defense, particularly when you use lethal force, you have to prove two rigorous standards. First, you must demonstrate a genuine, objectively reasonable fear for your life or fear of serious, catastrophic bodily harm.
Right.
And second, your response must be proportionate to the threat presented.
So it's the legal equivalent of someone stepping on your shoe in a crowded hallway and you responding by burning their house down.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. The law absolutely allows you to push them off your foot or maybe even shove them back to create distance, but it does not grant you the right to escalate a minor physical slight into a lethal encounter.
And in this trial, the prosecution established that Anthony brought a prohibited weapon to a school event. A school police officer testified that while carrying a knife under 5 inches might be technically legal in the broader state of Texas, it is a strict violation of school policy to have it on campus.
Yep. So he is already in a place he shouldn't be, carrying a weapon he shouldn't have, instigating a fight.
But let's look at the human element for a second, putting the strict letter of the law aside. You have a teenager, surrounded by athletes from an opposing school. Let's assume for a moment that someone in that crowd did shove him.
Okay.
Isn't it human nature to panic in that scenario? How does the law account for the messy, adrenaline-fueled reality of a teenager panicking versus a cold, calculated murder?
It's a fair question. The law does acknowledge panic, but it still demands an objective standard of reasonableness. A reasonable person might panic and throw a punch or panic and run away.
Right.
A reasonable person does not respond to a push by drawing a concealed knife and plunging it into the chest of an unarmed teenager who just stated he didn't want to fight. The disparity in force is simply too massive.
It's just entirely disproportionate.
Exactly. You cannot legally introduce a deadly weapon into a minor physical scuffle that you yourself provoked.
The escalation transforms the act from a fight into a homicide. And recognizing that the self-defense argument was legally bankrupt, the defense team attempted a maneuver that our sources called a Hail Mary. They asked for a directed verdict.
Yeah, a directed verdict. So after the prosecution rests its case, the defense can formally request that the judge step in, bypass the jury entirely, and rule in their favor immediately.
Just claiming the state completely failed to meet its burden of proof.
Right. The sources likened it to a football coach asking the referee to just end the game before the fourth quarter even begins, arguing the other team hasn't scored enough points.
It sounds desperate. I mean, why would a defense attorney even try that if they know the evidence is stacked against them and the judge will say no?
Well, it is a pro forma legal obligation. Defense attorneys are required to provide the most vigorous defense possible. They're preserving every possible objection in motion for a potential future appeal.
So they have to put it on the record.
Exactly. They have to show they challenged the state's evidence at every juncture, even when they privately know the motion will be swiftly denied, which it was. The judge rejected it instantly, the jury deliberated, and the legal argument for self-defense officially collapsed.
Okay, so we've established the undeniable facts. We've walked through the failure of the legal defense due to massive disproportionate force. The evidence is clear. The testimony is clear.
It's still clear.
And yet, this deep dive takes a deeply concerning turn when we examine the societal reaction outside those courtroom doors. Because despite all of this sworn testimony, activist groups still mobilized to defend Karmelo Anthony.
They did. The source material draws specific attention to high-profile activists, including Dominique Alexander of the Dallas Next Generation Action Network, along with groups organized in the style of the Black Panthers, who actually appeared outside the courtroom.
Yeah, they held protests actively defending Anthony and demanding his exoneration.
And Cartier family's commentary is fiercely critical of this mobilization. They point out that this defense appears to stem entirely from the racial dynamics of the individuals involved. Karmelo Anthony is Black, and Austin Metcalf, the victim, was white.
Right. The commentators argue that these activists are taking a tragedy rooted in individual failure and trying to force it into the historical mold of systemic racism.
Exactly. The sources argue these groups are treating this case like a modern-day Jim Crow railroading or a Central Park 5 scenario. They are superimposing a narrative of a biased, corrupt justice system preying on an innocent Black youth,
while completely bypassing the established reality that this youth brought a knife to a track meet and stabbed an unarmed peer.
Right, and there is a glaring piece of evidence that the sources bring up that completely shatters the narrative of a racially motivated conspiracy against Anthony.
Which is?
Of the 6 students who actually took the stand and testified against him, 4 of them were Black.
Wow. So the people standing in that courtroom, swearing an oath to tell the truth, and pointing the finger at Anthony as the undeniable aggressor were his own peers.
Exactly. And this is where the commentators express profound frustration with the activist class within their own community. They question the utility and the ethics of dedicating immense organizational energy, media attention, and protest resources to defending an individual who committed an undeniable act of murder.
It's a very pointed question. Why isn't this same energy being directed at addressing the actual pervasive mass violence affecting youth in these neighborhoods on a daily basis?
Yeah, it seems like it is infinitely easier to mobilize against a phantom systemic enemy than it is to look inward and address the deeply uncomfortable reality of individual choices.
For sure. If you can frame the trial as a racial injustice, you don't have to grapple with the horror of a kid from your community throwing his life away and taking another over a bruised ego.
And the Cartier family analysis is rooted heavily in a centrist, America First perspective on law and order. From this philosophical standpoint, a functioning justice system and the fundamental safety of any society relies entirely on objective standards of right and wrong.
The law must be blind to demographic markers.
Right. When activists demand leniency or attempt to rewrite the factual narrative of a crime based solely on the race of the perpetrator, it undermines the very foundation of the social contract.
You're creating a separate tier of justice based on tribal affiliation.
Exactly. The commentators argue that when you defend someone who intentionally brought a weapon to a peaceful event, provoked a confrontation, and killed an unarmed teenager, you are actively eroding the principles that keep all citizens safe. It ceases to be about justice and becomes entirely about team sports.
Which is incredibly dangerous. Justice cannot be tribal. If a community cannot uniformly condemn an act of senseless, undeniable violence because they feel a historical or demographic allegiance to the perpetrator, the mechanisms of accountability just break down.
Yep. The core argument of the source material is that true justice requires holding individuals strictly accountable for their own actions, regardless of the broader societal narrative surrounding their identity.
And this brings us directly back to you, listening to this deep dive and why dissecting these viral events is so critical. We are living in an era of unprecedented, overwhelming information overload.
Oh, absolutely. The moment a tragedy occurs, before the police tape is even secured, competing viral narratives are already being generated and monetized.
Right, and these narratives are explicitly designed to bypass your critical thinking, play on your historical grievances, and generate outrage.
They offer a simple, often emotionally satisfying story that completely obscures the messy, tragic truth. Relying on verifiable facts like the grueling, methodical process of sworn courtroom testimony, cross-examination, and forensic evidence is the only defense mechanism we have.
Without an anchor in objective reality, we are entirely at the mercy of online tribalism. And as we close out this deep dive, there is a heavy, vital question I want to leave you with. It is something to mull over the next time a viral legal case dominates your timeline.
What's that?
If society continues to reflexively filter every interpersonal conflict, every localized tragedy, through the macro lens of historical racial grievances, do we risk losing our collective ability to recognize basic individual responsibility?
That is a fascinating point. If every conflict is immediately elevated to a symptom of a massive systemic issue, the concept of personal agency disappears.
Right. How do we ever hold a single person accountable for the choices they make in a given moment if we decide the system made them do it?
It's a question that really challenges the way we consume news and react to tragedy in the digital age.
It forces us to look past the glowing screen, past the algorithms demanding our outrage, and look squarely at the actions of the individual. Remember that track meet we started talking about?
Yeah.
The whistle blows, the race starts, and everybody has to run in their own lane.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you are responsible for how you run your race, and you're responsible for your own actions. Thank you for joining us as we work to cut through the noise and get to the facts of this case.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to PoliticallyX. Stay curious and stay informed.